I sold my company for $20 million. My wife told me, tell your son that you've gone bankrupt. I didn't understand, but I did it anyway. The next morning, after just a few minutes of talking, I was left standing there in shock. Not because of what he said, but because of how he reacted. And in that moment, I realized it was time to stop trusting and start putting together a plan he would never see coming. I'm truly grateful you're here with me. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. If you were in this situation, would you trust or question it? Please note some elements are fictionalized for storytelling purposes, but the message behind it is meaningful and worth your time. I sold my company for $20 million on a Tuesday morning. My wife sat across from me at the kitchen table while I signed my name on the last page of the contract. The buyer's attorney nodded, shook my hand, and walked out with a black leather briefcase containing my company's new future. Margaret watched me for a long time after the door closed. You need to tell him you went bankrupt, she said. I stared at her. What? Tell our son the deal fell through, that you lost everything, that we're broke. Margaret, why would I? Just trust me this once. Her voice was tired, her eyes shadowed. Please, just this once. I didn't understand. But 40 years of marriage had taught me one thing. When Margaret said something in that tone, she had a reason. I took out my phone and called our son. He answered on the third ring. Dad, did the money come through? Not how are you? Not congratulations. Just did the money come through? I swallowed. Actually, the deal fell apart. The buyer backed out at the last minute. We lost everything. Silence. Then what do you mean you lost everything? I mean the company's gone. The sale collapsed. We're starting over from scratch. Another silence, longer this time. So you're telling me, his voice hardened, that you screwed this up, that you couldn't close one deal after 40 years in business? My chest tightened. Do you have any idea what this means for me? His voice rose. For me, Dad? Not for us, for him. I'm sorry, I said quietly. He laughed, bitter, hollow. You're sorry, great. That helps a lot. Then he hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at Margaret. She didn't say I told you so. She didn't have to. I'd just heard my son's true voice, and it wasn't the voice of someone who loved me. It was the voice of someone who needed me, needed my money, and resented me for failing to provide it. That was when I understood what Margaret had seen all along. And that was when I started planning. The doorbell rang at 7:15 the next morning. Too early for neighbors. Too early for deliveries. I walked to the front door and found two men standing on my porch. Both wore dark suits that didn't quite fit right, one too tight across the shoulders, one hanging loose on a thin frame. The broad-shouldered one smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Morning, he said. You Robert Chambers? I am. Can I help you? We're here about a financial matter, regarding your son. My stomach dropped. What about my son? The thin one pulled out his phone and held it up so I could see the screen. A loan agreement with my son's signature at the bottom. My home address listed under collateral. We represent a private lending service, the broad-shouldered man said. Your son borrowed $500,000 from our employer 6 months ago. The payment was due last week. We haven't received it. I felt the blood drain from my face. There must be some mistake. Mr. Chambers. The thin one lowered his phone. We're not here to debate. We're here to collect. Behind me, Margaret appeared at my shoulder, her bathrobe pulled tight. What's going on? She asked. The broad-shouldered man smiled at her. Ma'am, your son owes our employer a substantial amount of money. We're simply here to discuss repayment options. That's impossible, Margaret said, her voice rising. Our son has been doing well. He told us he got promoted last quarter. The thin one cut her off. Ma'am, with respect, your son hasn't shown up to work in 3 months. He's been spending his time in Las Vegas, Atlantic City, Biloxi. The word hit me like a fist. Gambling. We dealt with this before. Small stuff. A few thousand here and there when he was younger. He'd come to us apologetic, promising it would never happen again. We'd helped him, paid off the debts, made him actually swear on his mother's life that he'd stopped. I'd believed him. There's been a misunderstanding, I said, forcing my voice to stay level. I'll need to speak with my son before... You have 2 weeks, the broad-shouldered man interrupted. He pulled a card from his pocket and held it out to me. I didn't take it. He set it on the porch railing. After that, we start collecting in other ways. You understand what I mean by that? I understood perfectly. Now, before you think about calling the police, the thin one said, you should understand something. Your son signed these papers willingly. He listed your home as collateral. Legally speaking, this is a civil matter. The authorities won't touch it. He paused. But we're not bound by what's legal. We're bound by what's owed. Margaret's hand found my arm, her grip tight. The broad-shouldered man tipped his head almost polite. 2 weeks, Mr. Chambers. We'll be in touch. They walked back to a black sedan parked at the curb and drove away. I stood there staring at that business card on the railing. No name, just a phone number. Margaret pulled at my arm. Robert, what just happened? I picked up the card and walked back inside. My phone was still on the kitchen table next to a photograph the four of us taken 5 years ago on our back porch. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button. What would I even tell them? That my son had borrowed money from dangerous people. They'd say exactly what those men just said. It's a civil matter. Get a lawyer. By the time the courts got involved, those men would have already made good on their threat. And what threat exactly? They hadn't said the words. They didn't need to. Men like that didn't make house calls to have polite conversations. Margaret was crying now. He promised us. He swore he'd stopped. He looked us in the eye and promised. I know. War, so what do we do? I set my phone down and picked up the photograph. My son's face smiled back at me from 5 years ago. I tried to remember the last time I'd seen him in person. 3 weeks, a month. He'd been vague when I asked about work, said everything was fine. I'd taken him at his word because I wanted to believe him, because believing him was easier than asking the hard questions. And now, after that phone call yesterday, after hearing how he reacted when he thought the money was gone, I understood what Margaret had been trying to show me. My son didn't love me. He loved what I could give him. Margaret crossed the room and sat down across from me. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling. Call Rachel, she said quietly. I was thinking the same thing. She'll know what to do. I nodded, scrolling through my contacts until I found my daughter's name. Rachel, 37 years old. Financial analyst for a consulting firm in Houston. Sharp as a blade, twice as careful with money. She answered on the second ring. Dad, you okay? It's 7:30 in the morning. I need you to look into something for me, I said, quietly. There was a pause. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. Professional, guarded. What's wrong? I looked at Margaret still sitting there with tears running down her face. Looked at that photograph in my hand. At my son's smile that now felt like a lie I had been telling myself for years. Your brother, I said. I need to know everything. Where he's been, what he's been doing, how much trouble he's really in. Another pause. Longer this time. Dad, Rachel said slowly. What happened? I told her about the men on the porch, about the $500,000, about the casinos and the 2-week deadline and the threat that hung in the air like smoke. When I finished, the line was silent for so long, I thought she'd hung up. I'll call you back in an hour, she finally said. She didn't. It took her 3. She called back that evening. I was in the garage pretending to organize tools I'd already organized a month ago. Wrenches lined up by size, screwdrivers sorted by head type. Busy work. Anything to keep my hands moving, and my mind from circling back to those 2 men on my porch. Dad, Rachel's voice came through the phone speaker. I need 24 hours, maybe 36, but... She paused. The silence said more than her words. It doesn't look good? How bad? I'll know more tomorrow, just be ready. I hung up and stared at the pegboard on the wall. Every tool in its place, everything organized, controlled. If only the rest of my life worked that way. The garage door to the house opened. Margaret stood there backlit by the kitchen light, her arms crossed over her chest. You've been out here for 3 hours, she said. I'm cleaning. You're hiding. I set down the socket wrench I'd been holding and turned to face her. Maybe I am. She stepped down into the garage, closing the door behind her. In the dim overhead light, I could see she'd been crying again. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face puffy. We need to talk about this, she said. There's nothing to talk about until Rachel gets back to me. I'm not talking about your investigation. She spat the word like it tasted bad. I'm talking about what you said to those men this morning, about how you looked at our son's signature on that paper, like it was a crime. It is a crime. He used our house as collateral without asking. He's going through a rough patch. Her voice rose, echoing off the concrete walls. He needs our support, not your judgment. $500,000 isn't a rough patch, Margaret. So what, you're just going to throw him away? Let those men come after him after us. I took a breath, held it, let it out slowly. We'd had versions of this argument before. Smaller stakes, same battle lines. 3 years ago, when the community college called about his missing tuition payment, Margaret had been the one to answer. Told them there'd been a banking error. Paid it herself from her personal account. Never told me until I found the statement months later. He was embarrassed, she'd said. I was protecting him. 2 years before that, when his landlord called about 3 months of unpaid rent she'd driven across town with a check before I even knew there was a problem. He was going through a breakup, she'd explained. He just needed time to get back on his feet. Every time it was the same story. He just needed time. He just needed space. He just needed one more chance. He promised us, I said quietly. 8 years ago, when it was $5,000, he looked us in the eye and promised it would never happen again. People make mistakes. Then it was 10,000 2 years later. Same promise, same tears, same speech about how he'd learned his lesson. I stepped closer to her, and every single time I believed him. Every single time I told myself this is the last time. This is the bottom. He'll change now. Margaret's face crumpled. You've always been too hard on him, ever since he was little. Nothing he did was ever good enough for you. That landed like a punch because part of it was true. I'd pushed him, expected excellence, wanted him to have the drive that had built my company from nothing. But I'd also given him everything college tuition, a car seed money for 3 different business ventures that had all failed within a year. I gave him chances and I said, you gave him expectations. There's a difference. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. He spent his whole childhood trying to measure up to you, trying to be Robert Chambers Jr. Do you know what that does to a kid? So, this is my fault. My voice came out harder than I meant it to. I pushed him too hard, so now he gambles away $500,000. I didn't say that. Then what are you saying? We stood there in the half-light of the garage, years of unspoken resentments hanging in the air between us. The truth was, we'd both enabled him. I'd written those first checks, paid off those first debts, told myself I was helping, told myself he'd learn. And Margaret had covered for him in ways I was only beginning to understand. Every missed payment, every unexplained absence, every lie that didn't quite add up, she'd smoothed it over, made excuses, built a safety net that kept him from ever hitting bottom. But there's a difference between $5,000 and $500,000. Between helping your son through a mistake and watching dangerous men show up at your door with threats hidden in polite words. I had to choose, I said finally. This morning, standing on that porch, I had to choose between enabling him into an early grave or forcing him to face what he's done. He's our son. I know who he is. That's what scares me. Margaret stared at me for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back into the house, leaving the door open behind her. I stood there in the garage, surrounded by my organized tools and my failing family, and wondered when everything had gotten so broken. My phone buzzed in my pocket, email notification. Rachel. I pulled it up my thumb, hovering over the message. The subject line read, "You need to see this. Now." I opened it. Her message was short, but every word felt like a hammer blow. Dad, I had to call in some favors to pull this. It's worse than we thought. Forwarding everything below. I'm sorry. Bank statements, credit reports, screenshots of online casino accounts. The words blurred together as I scrolled, but certain numbers jumped out like they were written in neon. Total revolving credit debt, $180,487. Cash advances dating back 24 months. Cosigner/reference. Robert Chambers listed on 7 accounts. Casino host notes. Player shows family backing. Father owns medical distribution company approved for extended credit lines. My stomach dropped. 7 accounts. He'd used my name, my credit, my reputation, my business's leverage to borrow money. Money he'd gambled away. I kept scrolling. Casino loyalty accounts, player tier status, comped hotel rooms in Vegas, Atlantic City, Biloxi. The digital paper trail of someone who'd been living a double life while telling us he'd been promoted at work. The last document made my hands shake, a credit application from 4 months ago. Under employment, he'd written family business, medical equipment distribution. Under annual income, he'd put $250,000. Under references, he'd listed me, my name, my phone number, my home address. He'd been impersonating me, using my life as collateral for his lies. Robert, I looked up. Margaret had come back into the garage. She must have seen something in my face because she crossed the space between us quickly. What is it? I turned my phone so she could see, watched her eyes scan the screen, watched the color drain from her face as the numbers sank in. 180,000, she whispered. How did we not know? He used my name, my information. The creditors probably thought I was backing him. Her hand went to her mouth. For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. The garage felt suddenly too small, the air too thick. Then my phone started ringing in my hand, loud and insistent in the quiet. I looked at the screen. Las Vegas area code. It's him, I said. Margaret grabbed my wrist. Answer it. I stared at that phone at my son's number, glowing on the screen, and thought about all the times I'd answered before. All the times I'd listened to his explanations and his promises and his tears. All the times I'd believed him. I answered. Dad. His voice came through rough and tired like he hadn't slept. We need to talk. Dad, I know some guys probably came by. His voice hit me before I'd even registered pressing the answer button. Rough, tired, the voice of someone who hadn't slept in days, or maybe someone who'd slept in the wrong places. They threatened our home, I said. My hand tightened around the phone. Silence on the line. Then, look, I can explain. You have 48 hours to get back to Austin. We'll talk then. And Dad, I just need a little more time. I'm up right now if I can just... The words hit me like ice water. I'm up right now. He was still gambling. Still sitting at some table somewhere, throwing away money. He didn't have money he'd borrowed against my name, my house, my life. At 48 hours, I said again. Or I call the police. You wouldn't... I hung up. Margaret's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. You can't just order him around like an employee. I'm his father. That's exactly what I can do. He's a grown man. He's a grown man who just put our house up as collateral for $500,000 without asking us. That's not a man making his own choices. That's a boy making catastrophic mistakes. She let go of my wrist and stepped back, her face flushed with anger. You've always been like this, cold, controlling. No wonder he doesn't talk to us. He talks to us plenty when he needs money. The words came out harsher than I meant, but I couldn't take them back. Didn't want to. Margaret's face crumpled and she turned away, walking back into the house without another word. I stood there in the garage phone, still in my hand, wondering how we'd gotten here. How the family in that photograph, the one still sitting on my kitchen table, had fractured into this. The next morning, Rachel arrived. I heard her car pull into the driveway just after 8. When I opened the front door, she was already halfway up the walk, a leather messenger bag slung over her shoulder, and a cardboard file box balanced in her arms. She looked like me people always said. Same dark eyes, same serious mouth that didn't smile unless it meant it. She'd inherited my work ethic too, the kind that meant she'd driven 3 hours from Houston on a weeknight because I'd asked her to. Hey, Dad. She set the box down on the porch and hugged me, quick and tight. Where's Mom? Inside, still not talking to me. What else is new? She picked up the box again. We should sit down for this. We went to my study, a small room off the kitchen that I used for paperwork and bills. Rachel set the box on my desk and started pulling out folders, printed pages, highlighted sections, Post-it notes marking key passages. I called in some favors, she said. Friend of mine works in risk assessment at a credit bureau. Another one does fraud investigation for a casino group. This isn't exactly legal what I'm showing you, so don't ask me how I got it. I nodded. How bad is it? She opened the first folder. Bank statements going back 2 years. My son's name at the top, but accounts I'd never heard of. 11 different casino loyalty accounts. 7 credit cards all maxed out. Cash advances that started small, 500 here, 1,000 there, and then grew. 3,000, 8,000, 15,000 in a single day. Total credit card debt is 180,000, Rachel said. Her voice was calm, clinical, the way she got when she was delivering bad news to clients. But that's just the revolving credit. There are personal loans too, 3 of them. He used your name as a reference on all of them. How is that even possible? He listed you as a co-signer. Put down your phone number, your address, your business name back when you still owned it. The lenders probably did a soft credit check, saw your history, and figured you were backing him. I stared at the pages. Rows of numbers, dates, transactions that painted a picture of someone spiraling out of control. There's more, Rachel said. She pulled out another folder. This one was thinner, but the pages inside made my stomach turn. Screenshots of online gambling accounts, high roller tier status. Casino host notes that read like a manual for how to exploit someone. Player represents family wealth. Father owns medical distribution company, approved for extended credit. He's been using your reputation, Rachel said quietly. Telling them you're rich now that you'll cover his debts. They're giving him credit lines based on your name. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. My son hadn't just gambled away his own money. He'd weaponized my entire life, my business, my credit, my reputation to feed an addiction that was swallowing him whole. I also found these. Rachel slid 3 more pages across the desk. Loan applications from places I'd never heard of. Payday advance companies. Online lenders that charge interest rates that should have been illegal. Each one listed my home address. Each one used variations of my name as a reference: Robert L. Chambers, R. Chambers, Bob Chambers. He's been creative, Rachel said, and careful. He spaces out the application so no single lender sees the full picture. But when you add it all together, 180,000, what I said, in credit card debt alone. I can't tell you about the other loans because I can't access those records. But if he owes 500,000 to those men who came to your house, she closed the folder. That tracks. The door to the study opened. Margaret stood there, her arms crossed, her face hard. What's going on in here? Rachel's showing me. I know what she's showing you. Margaret's voice was sharp. She's been investigating your son like he's some kind of criminal, going through his private financial records without his permission. Oh, Mom, Rachel started. Don't mom me. This is an invasion of his privacy. He's a grown man. He has rights. He used Dad's name to commit fraud, Rachel said. Her voice stayed calm, but I heard the steel underneath. That's not privacy. That's a crime. He's your brother. And he's stealing from our father. The two of them stared at each other across my desk. I sat there between them, feeling the weight of my family tearing itself apart in real time. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. You've both already made up your minds about him. You've decided he's some kind of monster, but he's not. He's sick. He needs help, not persecution. She turned and walked out. A moment later, I heard footsteps on the stairs. The guest room door slammed shut. Rachel and I sat in silence. I'm sorry, she said finally. Don't be. You're doing what I asked. Yeah, but... She gestured at the ceiling toward the sound of her mother crying. This is tearing everyone apart. It was already torn. I closed the folder in front of me. We just didn't want to see it. The next 2 days passed in a kind of Cold War. Margaret stayed in the guest room, took her meals up there, spent hours on the phone with her sister, her voice a low murmur through the walls. Rachel stayed in town, working remotely from a coffee shop, checking in on me twice a day. My son didn't call, didn't text. The 48-hour deadline came and went. On the second night just after 11, my phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number, but I knew who it was. I'm coming home, but you're not gonna like what I have to tell you. I stared at that message for a long time. Tried to imagine what could possibly be worse than what I already knew. Couldn't. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:15. Same time as 2 days ago. Same pit in my stomach. But this time, it wasn't my son. It was one of those men from my porch, the broad-shouldered one. I recognized his voice immediately. Mr. Chambers, just calling to follow up. I said 2 weeks. That was before your son missed another payment. We're adding interest now. The amount owed is $520,000. Clock's still ticking. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there at my kitchen table holding my phone, staring at that family photograph that suddenly felt like it had been taken in another lifetime. My son was still gambling, still borrowing, still spiraling, and I had no idea how deep the hole really went. They came back the next afternoon. I was in my study when I heard the doorbell. That same aggressive rhythm, 3 hard jabs. I walked to the front door already knowing who I'd find. The broad-shouldered one stood on my porch, alone this time. His partner must have been waiting in the car. Mr. Chambers. He didn't wait for an invitation, just held out his phone. My employer wants to speak with you. I took it, put it to my ear. Mr. Chambers. The voice on the other end was calm, almost friendly. The kind of calm that came from absolute confidence. I understand you recently came into some money. 20 million, I'm told. I'm not paying my son's debts. I respect that position. I do, but here's the reality. The voice didn't change tone, didn't rise or fall, just kept that same steady, reasonable cadence. Your son used your home as collateral, legally speaking, gray area. Practically speaking, I have men who don't care much about legal distinctions. They care about getting paid. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you clarity. Your wife drives a silver sedan, doesn't she? Late model Camry, registration XKL7734. Saw her at the grocery store yesterday. Nice woman. Very careful about checking her mirrors in the parking lot. My blood went cold. You have until Friday, the voice continued. $500,000. After that, we start collecting in other ways. You understand what I mean? I understood perfectly. Friday, he said again. Then the line went dead. I handed the phone back to the broad-shouldered man. He took it, nodded once, and walked back to his car. They were gone 30 seconds later. I stood there in my doorway, my house suddenly feeling very small and very exposed. My wife's car sat in the driveway, silver, late model, registration visible on the rear bumper. They'd been watching us. I called my bank 20 minutes later. initiated the wire transfer from my study, my hands shaking so badly I had to type my password 3 times. $500,000. Just like that, gone. Margaret found me sitting at my desk, staring at the confirmation email. "What did you do?" Her voice came from the doorway. I didn't turn around. What I had to. "You paid them." "Yes." "You swore." Her voice broke. "You swore you wouldn't enable him anymore. You said it yesterday. You said you were done cleaning up his messes." "I'm not enabling him." I finally turned to face her. "I'm protecting us. There's a difference." "Is there—" She stepped into the study, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold something in. "Because from where I'm standing, you just taught him the same lesson we've been teaching him his whole life. That no matter how bad it gets, Mommy and Daddy will fix it." "They threatened you," I said quietly. "They know what car you drive. They know your license plate number. They've been following you." The color drained from her face. "So no," I continued. "I didn't pay them to enable our son. I paid them because the alternative was waiting to find out what collecting in other ways actually meant." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out without another word. I sat there in my study after she left, and without thinking about it, my hand went to my left side, pressed against my ribs, feeling for the ridge of scar tissue that ran 6 inches along my torso. The scar from 15 years ago. The scar that had saved my son's life. I closed my eyes, and I was back there. Back in that hospital room in 2008, when everything had been different. When my son had been different. He'd been 17, just finished his junior year of high school, honor roll, varsity baseball, the kind of kid who still said yes sir and no ma'am without prompting. We'd been planning college visits, talking about scholarships. Then one morning in July, he'd collapsed in our kitchen. Acute kidney failure. Genetic disorder nobody had seen coming. Toxins building in his blood faster than the doctors could filter them out. He needed a transplant, and he needed it fast. I didn't hesitate. Took the test that afternoon. Found out I was a match the next day. Signed the consent forms the day after that. They took us into surgery on a Tuesday morning. I remember lying on the gurney watching the fluorescent lights pass overhead as they wheeled me down the hallway. Remember the anesthesiologist telling me to count backward from 10. I made it to 7. When I woke up, the pain was immediate and overwhelming. A line of fire across my left side, where they'd cut through muscle and tissue to reach my kidney. The nurse told me the surgery had gone perfectly. Both of us stable, both of us alive. They wheeled me to his room that afternoon. He was awake, pale and weak but awake, the color already starting to come back to his face. "Hey, Dad." His voice was barely a whisper. "Hey, kid." They said you gave me your kidney." "Yeah." His eyes filled with tears. "You saved my life." I reached out and took his hand, held it tight despite the IV lines and the bandages and the pain screaming through my side. "That's what fathers do," I said. I opened my eyes, sat there in my study with my hand still pressed to that scar. 15 years. That's how long ago it had been. 15 years since I'd given him part of my body, part of my life. Since I'd woken up every morning for months afterward, feeling that ache in my side, knowing it was worth it because my son was alive. And now sitting here with a wire transfer confirmation on my screen, I wondered what the hell had happened to that kid. The one who'd looked at me with tears in his eyes and promised he'd make me proud. The doorbell rang. I looked at my watch. 8:30 at night. 3 hours since I'd sent the money. I walked to the front door and opened it. My son stood on my porch. He looked terrible. 20 pounds lighter than the last time I'd seen him, maybe more. Dark circles under his eyes. Clothes that hung off his frame like they belonged to someone else. His hands were shaking. "Dad," his voice cracked. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He started crying right there on the porch, big heaving sobs that shook his whole body. I should have felt anger. Should have felt rage at what he'd done, what he'd cost me, what he'd put his mother through. But all I felt was a deep, hollow ache. The same ache I'd felt waking up from that surgery 15 years ago. The ache of giving something precious away and not knowing if it would matter. "Come inside," I said quietly. He stumbled through the doorway. Margaret appeared at the top of the stairs, her hand over her mouth. "Sweetheart," she said, and started down toward him. Our son collapsed into her arms in the front hallway, crying like he was 10 years old again. "I'll pay you back," he said between sobs. "I swear, Dad, I'll pay you back, every penny." I looked at this man, my son who I'd given a kidney to, who I'd loved and protected and apparently failed, and I said the only thing I could think to say. "Get some sleep, we'll figure it out tomorrow." He nodded, let his mother guide him up the stairs toward his old bedroom. I stayed downstairs, went to the kitchen and pulled out my laptop. Opened it on the table next to that family photograph that still sat there mocking me with its frozen moment of happiness. I pulled up his social media, hadn't checked it in months, maybe longer. His page loaded, and there at the top of his feed, posted 2 hours ago, a photograph. My son standing at a craps table, chips stacked in front of him like towers, the Las Vegas Strip visible through the windows behind him. His arm around another man, I didn't recognize, both of them holding drinks, both of them grinning. The timestamp read 6:47 p.m., 2 hours ago, while I'd been sitting in my study staring at that wire transfer confirmation, while those men had still been threatening my wife, while I'd been pressing my hand against that scar and remembering a boy who'd promised to make me proud. I stared at that photo. My son was upstairs right now, supposedly asleep in his childhood bedroom. Unless he wasn't. Unless that wasn't him, I just let into my house. No, that was crazy. I'd looked right at him, held him when he was crying. It was him. But then who'd posted that photo? And why? I confronted Margaret before sunrise. She was in the guest room sitting with a book she wasn't reading. I knocked once and opened the door. That wasn't him, I said. The photo. He was in Vegas earlier that evening. He showed up here. She looked up. You're being paranoid. Am I? I showed her the screenshot Rachel had sent my son at a blackjack table timestamp. Earlier that evening, he'd walked through our front door. Explain this. She stared at it, then stood. Let me check. We went upstairs together. His bedroom door was closed. Margaret opened it carefully. He was there, on top of the covers, fully dressed, one arm over his face, snoring softly. See? Margaret whispered. He's home. You're imagining things. I watched my son's chest rise and fall. He was here, real, breathing, but that photo existed. Rachel had seen it. I'd seen it. The timestamp didn't lie. After Margaret left, I went back in, found his phone on the nightstand. I knew his passcode. He'd never changed it since high school, the year he got his driver's license. I opened his social media. The photo was gone, deleted, erased like it had never existed. I checked his recent activity. Nothing, no posts, no comments, no tagged photos. His entire feed looked clean, curated, normal. But someone had posted that photo. Someone had seen him there. And now it was gone, scrubbed away in the middle of the night while we slept under the same roof. The next morning he came downstairs around 10, showered, clean clothes, hair combed. Morning, Dad. He poured coffee, sat across from me at the kitchen table. I was thinking about sending out job applications today. Maybe go back to school, finish my degree. Margaret came in from the laundry room, her face lighting up. That's wonderful, honey. They talked for 20 minutes, classes, programs, night school options at Austin Community College. Margaret smiled for the first time in days, her whole body relaxing as she listened to him, describe plans for associate degrees in business administration. I sat there drinking my coffee, watching his performance, saying nothing. Over the next week, I watched him check his phone every 10 minutes, take calls in the backyard, voice low back, turn to the house, announce he was going for a drive, and return 3 hours later with no explanation and no groceries, no errands completed, nothing to show for the time. Margaret saw a son getting his life together. I saw a son still spinning out, just more carefully. On the third day, I called Rachel from my car while parked outside a hardware store. Keep monitoring him, I said. She sighed on the other end. Dad, this is starting to feel invasive. Are you sure? I'm sure. Just give me a day or two. She called back on the 5th day. He's gambling online, she said without preamble. I tracked his IP address through a contact at work. 3 new loans under fake names, Mark Johnson, David Miller, Chris Anderson. The total's about $60,000 across all 3 accounts. I sat in a grocery store parking lot, watching people push shopping carts toward their cars. Normal people whose biggest problems were what to make for dinner and whether they had remembered to buy milk. There's more, Rachel said softly. He forged your signature on 2 loan applications. One was denied, the other was approved, $40,000. It went into an account he opened last month. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. I also called some of his old friends from college, Rachel continued. The ones whose numbers I could find on social media. They haven't heard from him in 2 years. One guy, Brandon Miller, you remember him? He loaned him $5,000 3 years ago, never got it back, cut him off completely. Said he felt bad about it, but couldn't keep enabling him. Did any of them know where he's been? No, nobody wants to talk to him anymore. Dad, he's burned every bridge outside the family. We're all he's got left. At home, the week continued its false rhythm. Family dinners, Three of us at the kitchen table, passing dishes of pot roast and mashed potatoes, making small talk about the weather and neighborhood gossip. My son told us about job listings he'd found on Indeed and LinkedIn, plans he was making to update his resume. Margaret smiled, squeezed his hand across the table. "See," she said to me later while washing dishes. "He's doing better. He just needed support, a little faith." I wanted to tell her the truth, show her Rachel's reports, the evidence that he was still gambling, still borrowing, still lying, while eating the food we cooked and sleeping in the bed we'd bought him. But I couldn't. That hope in her eyes, fragile and desperate as a candle flame in wind, would shatter. And I wasn't ready to be the one who shattered it, so I said nothing. On the 7th morning, I found Margaret at the kitchen table crying. "What happened?" She pointed at the landline phone on the counter. "There's a message. You need to listen." I played the voicemail. Three men's voices layered and distorted, different from the men who'd come to the door. Harder, colder, no pretense of politeness. "This message is for Robert Chambers. Your son owes our organization $1,200,000. He borrowed from us after you paid his previous debt to our competitors. He told us you were good for the full amount. We expect payment within 2 weeks. We don't negotiate." Click. I stood there, phone in hand, the words echoing in my skull. $1,200,000. After you paid his previous debt. I'd given him $500,000. Watched him come home broken swearing on his mother's grave that he'd change. And he'd taken that chance, that clean slate I'd bought with my retirement money, and gone right back. Borrowed more, lost more, dug the hole twice as deep. "Robert," Margaret's voice was thick with tears, "you have to pay them." I looked at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 40 years, the mother of my children, the person who'd stood beside me through business failures and late nights and every hard season we'd weathered together. And I realized we were standing on opposite sides of a war neither of us had chosen. "No," I said quietly. "What? I'm not paying." "Robert, they'll hurt him." "They'll hurt him anyway. Every time we pay, we just buy him more rope to hang himself with. Don't you see that we're not helping? We're enabling. I see that you're willing to let our son face dangerous people because you're too stubborn to admit you might be wrong. I'm willing to let him face consequences, for the first time in his life. Because if I don't, Margaret, he's going to end up gone, not from threats. From overdose or suicide or getting in too deep with people we can't protect him from." Margaret stared at me like I'd become a stranger. "I can't believe you're saying this. I can't believe it took me this long to say it." She stood up, her chair scraping against tile. "Then you do what you think is right, but don't ask me to watch while you abandon our son." She walked out. A minute later, I heard the guest room door close upstairs. I stood alone in the kitchen, that family photograph, still sitting on the table where I'd left it days ago, and thought about how far we'd fallen from the people in that picture. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Romano sends his regards. Your son's debt is now $540,000. We're not as patient as the last guys. 2 weeks. After that, we start collecting from the family." I sat down heavily in the chair Margaret had just vacated. $1.4 million. My son had gambled away my $500,000 and borrowed almost 3 times that amount in less than a week. And I still had no idea how deep this hole really went. They came back on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker, trying to convince myself that everything would somehow work itself out. Margaret had been gone for 3 days. The house felt hollow without her. Every room echoed with the arguments we'd had, the accusations, the silence that followed. Rachel had called that morning. She'd found more debts, smaller ones, scattered across payday loan sites and cash advance apps. Another $60,000, all under fake names. But none of it explained the men who'd shown up at my door 2 weeks earlier, the ones with the business card and the 2-week deadline. I heard the car pull into the driveway at 3:47 p.m. 3 men this time, not 2. I watched them through the kitchen window as they climbed out of a black Escalade. They moved differently than the first pair, heavier, more deliberate. The leader was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, his suit tailored but his knuckles scarred. The other 2 flanked him like sentries. I opened the door before they could knock. "Mr. Chambers," the leader said. His voice was calm, almost polite. "We need to talk." "Who are you?" "My name doesn't matter. What matters is that your son owes my employer a substantial amount of money, and you've been avoiding our calls." I hadn't been avoiding anything. I'd thrown away their business card the day after they left. But I didn't say that. "How much?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. $540,000. The number hit me like a fist. I'd already paid $500,000 2 months ago. How could it be more? "That's not possible," I said. You paid the original loan, he interrupted. This is what your son owes now. The original debt was $450,000. He's been making minimum payments barely, but the interest compounds at 20% per month. He missed 3 payments. The balance is now $540,000 and it's growing every day. I felt the air leave my lungs. 20% per month. That's illegal, I said. It's a private loan, Mr. Chambers. Your son signed a contract. He understood the terms. He pulled a folded document from his jacket. See for yourself. I took the paper. It was a loan agreement dated 4 months earlier with my son's signature at the bottom. $450,000, principal 20% monthly interest compounding. No grace period. I don't have that kind of money. The man tilted his head, studying me. We know about the sale of your company. $20 million. We're not asking for all of it, just what your son owes. My hands tightened on the doorframe. Who told you about the sale? Your son talks when he's losing. He told people in Vegas that his father just sold a business for $20 million. Word gets around. Behind him, one of the other men shifted his weight, his jacket falling open just enough to reveal a gun holstered at his side. I'm not paying, I said. The leader's smile faded. Mr. Chambers, I don't think you understand the situation. This isn't a negotiation. Your son borrowed money from a very serious organization. If he doesn't pay, they'll collect in other ways. Then let them collect from him. They will. But first they'll collect from you. He pulled a folded envelope from his jacket and handed it to me. Inside were photographs, pictures of my house, my car, Rachel's apartment building in Houston. One photo showed Margaret getting into her sister's car. My blood ran cold. These are just to show you that we know where everyone is, the man said. We don't want trouble, Mr. Chambers. We just want our money. I stared at the photos, my hands shaking. You're threatening my family. We're informing you. Your son made a choice. Now you have to make one. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. It means your daughter might have an accident on her way home from work. It means your wife might not feel safe anymore. It means you might wake up one night and find that your house isn't as secure as you thought. My heart pounded. We wouldn't prefer to, but we will if we have to. This is business, Mr. Chambers, nothing personal. I already made my decision. I'm not paying. The man's expression hardened. Then you're making a mistake. You have 1 week, 7 days. After that, the interest goes to 30% per month, and we stop being polite. In 7 days, your son will owe $642,000. In 14 days, $834,000. The clock is ticking. He turned and walked back to the Escalade. The other 2 followed their eyes, never leaving me. I stood in the doorway, watching them drive away, the envelope still in my hand. I called Rachel as soon as they were gone. They came back, I said. What, who? The men. The ones who came before. They said he owes $540,000 now. They showed me pictures of you, of Margaret. Oh, and Dad, slow down. What are you talking about? I told her everything. The leader, the interest rate, the photos, the threats. My voice cracked halfway through, and I had to stop to catch my breath. They're escalating, Rachel said. This isn't just debt collection anymore. These people are dangerous. What do? You don't pay. Not yet. Let me dig deeper. If they're charging 20% per month, they're not legitimate lenders. They're loan sharks. There might be a way to fight this. Rachel, they threatened you. They threatened your mother. I know, but if you pay now, it won't stop. They'll keep coming back. You need to find out exactly what he owes and to whom. Otherwise, you're just throwing money into a black hole. She was right. I knew she was right. But the photos sat on the kitchen table staring up at me, and all I could think about was what would happen if I didn't pay. That night I tried calling Margaret. She didn't answer the first time, or the second. On the third try, she picked up. What do you want, Robert? Her voice was cold, distant. I barely recognized it. They came back, I said. The men. They're saying he owes more now, over $500,000. They showed me pictures of you, of Rachel. Then pay them. Margaret, pay them, Robert. I don't care what it costs. I don't care if you have to sell the house. Just pay them and make this stop. If I pay now, it won't stop. He'll just keep... I don't care. Her voice broke and I heard her sobbing on the other end of the line. I don't care if he does it again. I just want him safe. I want us safe. Please, Robert, please. I closed my eyes, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. If I pay them, I'm signing his death warrant, I said quietly. He'll think he can keep doing this. He'll keep gambling until he owes $10 million, $20 million. And one day, I won't be able to save him. Then at least we'll have tried. We have tried. I've been trying his whole life. And every time I bail him out, he gets worse. The line went silent for a long moment. Then I'm done, she said. I'm done with you, and I'm done with this family. Don't call me again. She hung up. I sat in the dark kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. Outside, the Escalade drove past my house. Again, slow, deliberate, a reminder that they were watching. The phone rang. I grabbed it, thinking it might be Margaret calling back. It wasn't. "Mr. Chambers," the voice said, calm, polite. "Just calling to remind you. 7 days, the clock is ticking." He hung up. I sat there in the darkness alone, wondering how much longer I could hold out before everything I loved was taken from me. My son stood in the entryway, reeking of cigarettes and desperation. His shirt was untucked, his hair wild, his eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept in days. "I need $1.2 million, he said. No greeting, no apology, just the demand. "By Friday, they're going to hurt me, Dad. They showed me photos, what they do to people who don't pay." I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. Margaret appeared at the landing, pulling her bathrobe tight around her waist. "Sweetheart," she said, hurrying down. "Your father and I were just talking about, they're going to hurt me, Mom." His voice cracked, the words tumbling out faster now. "I saw the photos. I know what they do to people. I know what happens when you don't pay these guys." She reached him and pulled him into her arms without hesitation. He collapsed against her, this 32-year-old man, crying like a child, his shoulders shaking. "We'll figure it out." She murmured, her hand on the back of his head, the way she used to when he was small and had nightmares. "We'll find a way. We always do." "No," I said from the bottom of the stairs. "We won't." They both turned to look at me. "I'm not paying." "Dad, please." His voice rose, panic threading through it. "You don't understand. These aren't normal people. They don't negotiate. They don't give extensions. You need treatment, real treatment, a residential facility, the kind you can't check yourself out of after 3 days." "I don't need treatment." He pulled away from Margaret, his voice climbing toward a shout. "I just need capital to get back on my feet. One good run and I can pay everyone back. I know I can. I've done it before. You need help." The words felt like swallowing glass. Every instinct I had as a father screamed at me to save him, to write the check, to make the nightmare go away. But I knew God help me. I knew that saving him now would destroy him later. "And until you accept that I can't help you." She turned to me, her expression twisted between love and fury. "He's your flesh and blood. How can you turn your back on him like this? How can you just stand there when he's telling you his life is in danger?" "I'm not turning my back. I'm watching my son destroy himself and having the courage to say no. For the first time in his life, I'm saying no. Courage." She spat the word like poison. "This isn't courage. This is pride. You'd rather be right than save your own son. You'd rather prove a point than protect your child. I'd rather let him face reality than watch him spiral into an early grave." I looked at my son, forcing myself to meet his eyes. "I love you too much to keep enabling you. Too much to watch you throw your life away and pretend I'm helping by cleaning up the mess." He stared at me like I'd struck him. "You love me." He laughed, bitter and hollow. "You don't even know what love means." "I know what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean protecting you from every consequence. It doesn't mean bailing you out every time you make the same mistake. It means being there when your family needs you." His hands were shaking now, fists clenched at his sides. "It means not abandoning your son when dangerous people are threatening to hurt him. It means knowing when to let go." My voice broke despite my best effort to keep it steady. "When to step back and let you fall. Because if I keep catching you every time, you're never going to learn to stand on your own. They're going to hurt me." His voice dropped to a whisper, all the fight draining out of him. "Do you understand that? They showed me pictures of what they did to the last guy who didn't pay. Do you want that to happen to me? Then maybe you should have thought about that before you borrowed their money." The words came out harsher than I meant them to. Colder, but I couldn't take them back, couldn't soften them. "Before you gambled it away, before you lied to us, again." My son looked at me for a long moment. Something in his expression hardened, shifted from pleading to something else. Something I didn't recognize. "I'll remember this," he said quietly. Then he turned and walked out. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled in their frames. Margaret spun on me the instant he was gone. "If anything happens to him, if they hurt him, because you were too stubborn to help, I will never forgive you. Never. Do you hear me? Get in line." She stared at me like I'd transformed into a stranger right in front of her. Then she turned and walked upstairs without another word. The guest room door closed with a sharp click. I stood alone in the entryway, my son's words echoing in the sudden silence. "You don't even know what love means." Maybe he was right. The next 2 days passed in Cold War. Margaret stayed in the guest room, took her meals up there on trays. Wouldn't look at me when we passed in the hallway. I heard her on the phone with her sister Linda for hours at a time, her voice rising and falling through the walls. My son didn't call, didn't text. The silence was somehow worse than his presence had been worse than the arguments and the lies. At least when he was here, I knew where he was. On the second day, my daughter called. "Dad, Mom told me what happened." "I'm sure she did. Are you really not going to pay?" Rachel's voice was careful, measured, her analyst voice. "You're really just going to let those people come after him?" "That's right. But what if they hurt him? What if this isn't just a threat?" "Indeciso espanioned." I closed my eyes and leaned against the kitchen counter. If I give in now, he'll never change. Next time it'll be 2 million, then 5. It always escalates. You know that. So you're choosing tough love. I'm choosing reality. There's a difference. She was quiet for a moment. "Mom says she can't stay in the house with you?" "Then she'll have to make a choice." "Oh, Dad, I have to go." I hung up before she could say more, before she could add her voice to the chorus telling me I was wrong. On the third day, I came home from the grocery store to find Margaret in our bedroom, packing a suitcase on the bed. "What are you doing?" She didn't look up, just kept folding clothes with precise, angry movements. "I'm staying with Linda for a few days. I need space. I need to not be here." A few days or forever. "I don't know." She closed the suitcase and zipped it with more force than necessary. "I can't be here right now. Can't look at you. Can't pretend everything's okay when our son is out there terrified and you won't help him. I am helping him by not..." "Stop." She held up a hand, finally looking at me. Her eyes were red. "I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear your justifications or your logic. He's in danger, real danger. And you have the money to fix it. That's all that matters to me right now." She picked up the suitcase and walked past me toward the door. "If you leave," I said to her back, "you're choosing him over us, over 40 years of marriage." She stopped in the doorway, didn't turn around. "No," she said quietly. "I'm choosing not to watch you destroy what's left of our family. There's a difference." Then she was gone. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard the front door open and close, heard her car start in the driveway and pull away. The house felt enormous suddenly, empty in a way it had never been before. I went back to the kitchen. That family photograph was still sitting on the table where I had left it days ago. 4 of us smiling at a camera, frozen in a moment that felt like it belonged to different people entirely. I picked it up and studied our faces, tried to remember when we'd taken it, tried to remember what that happiness had felt like, if it had ever been real, or just another comfortable lie we'd told ourselves. Couldn't. My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. "Tick-tock, Mr. Chambers. Your wife made the right choice. Maybe you should too. Friday's coming fast." I deleted the message and sat down at the empty table in my empty house, waiting for whatever came next. If you're still here, tell me, would you pay the $1.4 million to save your son, or refuse and let him face the consequences? Comment 1 and your answer. Quick note, some details ahead are dramatized for storytelling. You can stop here or stay to see how dark this really gets. I woke to the sound of breaking glass. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. The clock on my nightstand read 2:17 a.m. The house was dark, silent, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. Then I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving through the living room. I sat up, my heart pounding. Margaret was at her sister's. Rachel was in Houston. I was alone. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Then they started climbing. I reached for my phone, but before I could dial 911, my bedroom door burst open. 3 men filled the doorway, silhouettes against the dim light from the hallway. The leader, the same broad-shouldered man from before, stepped inside. "Mr. Chambers," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "We need to have a conversation. Get out of my house." "We will, as soon as you understand what you're dealing with." He flicked on the light. The other 2 men moved to either side of the door, blocking my exit. One of them carried a manila folder. "Your son's debt isn't just about gambling anymore," the leader said. He nodded to the man with the folder, who stepped forward and dropped it on my bed. Papers spilled out, printed emails, bank statements, wire transfer receipts. I picked one up with shaking hands. The header read, Chambers Medical Ventures, LLC. My name, my address, my face on a company logo I'd never seen before. "What is this?" I whispered. "Your son's other business," the leader said. "The one he's been running while losing our money at blackjack tables. He's been telling people you're launching a new medical equipment company, promising 15 to 20% returns. People believed him because they know your name. They trust you." I stared at the documents. There were emails, dozens of them sent from an address that looked like mine, but wasn't. Investment agreements with signatures I didn't recognize. Promotional materials featuring stock photos of medical equipment and testimonials from satisfied investors. That this is fake, I said. I didn't. We know you didn't. But your son used your name, your reputation, your connections. He registered the company at this address. He built a website with your bio. He even forged your signature on endorsement letters. He pulled out another document and held it up. It was a letter on fake company letterhead, signed with my name. The signature looked almost perfect. I recognized the way my son had practiced copying it years ago. How much? I asked, my voice barely audible. Enough to destroy you, the leader said. Wire fraud across state lines is a federal offense, Mr. Chambers. Identity theft, forgery. When the victims realize they've been scammed, and they will, the FBI is going to come knocking on your door. Not his, yours. Because it's your name on everything. I felt the room tilt. I didn't know. I had nothing to do with this. Doesn't matter. The evidence says otherwise. Your name, your address, your signature. You think the FBI is going to believe you had no idea your son was running $1 million scam out of your house? Sakto. $1 million. At least, he interrupted. Maybe more. We don't know the full extent yet. But we know enough to understand that your son isn't just in debt to us anymore. He's a federal fugitive waiting to happen. The man with the folder pulled out more documents, wire transfers showing money moving through accounts I'd never heard of. Shell companies, offshore accounts, casinos in Vegas, Macau, Atlantic City. Here's what's going to happen, the leader said. The people your son stole from are going to figure it out. They're going to file police reports. The FBI is going to investigate. And when they do, they're going to find a paper trail that leads straight to you, unless you do something about it. Like what? Repay the victims, all of them. Make the problem go away before it becomes a federal case. I don't even know how much he stole. Then you'd better figure it out. Fast. He turned toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Chambers, the $540,000 your son owes us, that deadline still stands. 1 week. You've got 7 days to pay us, and however long it takes the FBI to connect the dots. I'd say you're running out of time. The three men left as quickly as they'd come. I heard them walk down the stairs through the living room, out the front door. A moment later, the Escalade's engine roared to life, and they were gone. I sat on my bed, surrounded by papers, staring at the documents that proved my son had stolen my identity and used it to defraud God knows how many people. I picked up my phone and called Rachel. She answered on the third ring, her voice groggy. Dad, it's 2:30 in the morning. They broke into the house, I said. The men. They brought documents. Rachel, he's been running an investment scam, using my name. There was a long pause. I'm on my way, she said. Rachel arrived at dawn. She spread the documents across the kitchen table, her laptop open beside her, cross-referencing names and numbers. I made coffee but couldn't drink it. My hands were shaking too badly. This is bad, Dad, she said after an hour. Really bad. How bad? I'm seeing wire transfers to offshore accounts, shell companies, a fake website that's been live for 6 months. If even half of these investment agreements are real, he's stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars. How do we find out who the victims are? I can trace some of the bank accounts, but it'll take time. And once I start digging, there's a chance someone will notice. If the FBI is already investigating, they're not yet, but they will be. Rachel looked up at me. What are you going to do? I don't know. I stared at the papers spread across the table. My name, my signature, my reputation built over 40 years now weaponized by my own son. You need to call Gordon Blake, Rachel said. Today, before this gets any worse. And tell him what? That my son committed wire fraud using my identity. That I'm potentially liable for $1 million in losses. Estolpt. Yes, exactly that. Because if you don't get ahead of this, the FBI is going to assume you were complicit. I closed my eyes. In one night, my son had gone from a gambling addict with a debt problem to a federal criminal. And he'd drag me down with him. I'll find out how much he stole, I said quietly. Find out who the victims are. I'll call Gordon and figure out what we do next. Rachel nodded and went back to her laptop. I walked to the window and looked out at the empty driveway. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It should have been beautiful. Instead, all I could think about was the ticking clock. 7 days until the loan sharks escalated. Weeks, maybe days, until the FBI got involved. And somewhere in Vegas, my son was probably still gambling, unaware that his house of cards was about to collapse. The email arrived at 6:23 a.m., 3 hours after the men left. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the past 3 hours staring at the documents they'd thrown on my bed, printed emails, wire transfers, a fake company website with my face on it. Chambers Medical Ventures. My name, my reputation, my signature forged. Rachel's subject line read, "I found the full paper trail. Call me now." I called. "Dad," she said, her voice tight. "The men who broke into your house, they were telling the truth. I've spent all night tracking the money. It's worse than we thought." My stomach dropped. Part of me had hoped the documents were fake, some elaborate scare tactic. But Rachel's voice told me everything I needed to know. "How bad?" I asked. "The $780,000, 13 victims, federal wire fraud charges." The room tilted. She explained it quickly, methodically, the way she always did when she was trying to stay calm. My son had created a fake company, Chambers Medical Ventures, and pitched it to friends, family friends, and acquaintances as a new medical equipment startup. He'd told them I was the founder, that I was investing my own money, and that returns would be 15 to 20% within a year. 13 people had invested. The total was $780,000. "He used your name, your reputation, your connections," Rachel said. "He registered the company at your address. He created a fake website with your bio. Some of these people called you to verify the investment, but he intercepted the calls. Do you remember anyone asking you about a medical equipment startup in the last 6 months?" I did. 2 people, a man from church and an old colleague, had mentioned something in passing. I'd assumed they were confused talking about my old company. I'd brushed it off. "Where's the money?" I asked. "Gone." He funneled it through 3 shell companies: Henderson Medical Solutions, Bluebonnet Capital Partners, and Sunrise Ventures, LLC. Then he wired it to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. From there, it went to casinos in Vegas and Macau. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up. "Dad, are you still there?" "At how much?" I finally said. "Total. How much does he owe?" Rachel paused. I heard papers rustling on her end. The best estimate based on what I can track, $2.3 million. I sat down at the kitchen table, my legs giving out. "That's $540,000 in loan shark debt, $780,000 in investment fraud, and another $980,000 that he moved offshore and gambled away. If the victims file police reports, and they will, he's looking at wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and conspiracy charges, federal charges. Dad, this isn't just debt anymore. This is prison time." I stared at the documents spread across the table in front of me, the ones the men had left. The proof that my son had stolen my identity. "Who are the victims?" I asked. "Retirees mostly, small business owners, a few of your old church friends. The amounts range from $22,000 to $140,000. Most of them don't even know yet that the investment was fake. They think they're still waiting for returns." I thought about the faces I knew from church, from the Rotary Club, from 40 years of building a reputation in Austin. People who'd trusted me. People who'd shaken my hand and congratulated me when I sold my company. People my son had lied to. "What do I do?" I asked. "You call a lawyer, today. And you prepare to repay every cent, because the alternative is watching him go to federal prison for 20 years. I spent the rest of the morning reading through everything, the documents from the men, the files Rachel sent. The fake company website looked professional, clean design, stock photos of medical equipment, testimonials from satisfied clients. My bio was copied word for word from my LinkedIn profile. The investment prospectus promised double-digit returns in a growing market. It even included a forged signature, my signature, on a letter of endorsement. I recognized the handwriting. He'd practiced copying my signature for years, back when he used to sign his own report cards in high school. The bank records showed the money trail deposits into Henderson Medical Solutions, transfers to Bluebonnet Capital Partners, then a wire to the Cayman Islands account. From there, the money scattered $30,000 to the Bellagio, $50,000 to the Wynn, $70,000 to a casino in Macau I'd never heard of. He'd spent nearly $1 million in 4 months. I printed every page, every bank statement, every wire transfer, every forged document. I needed to see it all laid out in front of me to understand the full scope of what he'd done. The investment agreements were the worst part. Each one was personalized, addressed to people I knew. Some included handwritten notes. "Thanks for believing in this, Mr. Mitchell," or "Looking forward to celebrating our success together, Patricia." His handwriting, his lies. I called my lawyer, a man named Gordon Blake, who'd handled the sale of my company. I explained everything: the gambling, the fake investment company, the 13 victims, the shell companies, the offshore accounts. Jesus, Robert, Gordon said. Do you know how serious this is? Yes. No, I don't think you do. Wire fraud across state lines is a federal offense. Identity theft, forgery. If the victims press charges, and they will, your son is looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison, minimum. What if I repay them, all of them? Gordon paused. It might help. Judges look favorably on restitution, but it won't make the charges go away. The U.S. Attorney's office doesn't care if the victims get their money back. They care about prosecuting fraud. They want to make examples of people like your son. So what do? You repay every victim. You document every payment. You hire a criminal defense attorney for your son. And you prepare for the possibility that he's going to prison anyway. Robert, even with full restitution, he's committed multiple federal crimes. The evidence is overwhelming. And how long do I have? Once the victims realize they've been defrauded, they'll file police reports. Once that happens, the FBI gets involved. You probably have a few weeks, maybe a month. But the clock is ticking. I hung up and stared at the spreadsheet Rachel had sent. Financial summary as of October 2025. Loan shark debt, Romano, $540,000, investment fraud, 13 victims, $780,000. Offshore gambling losses, $980,000. Total documented losses, $2,300,000, $2.3 million. I had $20 million from the sale of my company. I could cover it, barely. But that wasn't the point. The point was that my son had destroyed 13 family savings, forged my name, and gambled away nearly $1 million, and he hadn't stopped. Even now, somewhere in Vegas, he was probably sitting at a blackjack table betting money he didn't have, thinking I would bail him out again. I called him. He didn't answer. I called again. Still nothing. I left a voicemail. I know about the investment scam. I know about the shell companies, the Cayman account, the forgery. I know about all of it. Call me back. He didn't. That night, I sat alone in the dark house, the financial documents spread across the kitchen table. Margaret was still at her sister's. Rachel was in Houston. My son was in Vegas. I pulled up the list of victims Rachel had sent. 13 names, 13 amounts, 13 families who'd trusted the Chambers name. Patricia Hernandez, widow, age 73, $65,000, her husband's life insurance. Robert Mitchell, retired teacher, age 67, $40,000, his grandson's college fund. Susan Wright, Michael's mother, $55,000, her retirement savings. I stared at the names until they blurred. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were real people, people who'd worked their entire lives for that money, people who'd trusted me. I couldn't save my son from this, but I could save them. I opened my laptop and began drafting checks. I called the bank manager immediately. David, this is Robert Chambers. I just received an alert about a $2.5 million transfer to the Cayman Islands. I did not authorize that transaction. There was a pause on the other end. Mr. Chambers, we have a power of attorney on file for you. It was notarized last month. Your son presented it this morning when he initiated the transfer. I never signed a power of attorney, I said. My voice was louder than I intended. Stop that transfer, right now. Let me put you on hold. 5 minutes of silence. Then David came back on the line. We've frozen the transaction, but Mr. Chambers, the documentation looks legitimate. We'll need to investigate. I'm going to recommend you come in and review the paperwork in person. I grabbed my keys and drove to the bank. David met me in a small conference room and slid a folder across the table. Inside was a power of attorney document 3 pages long, granting my son full access to all my accounts. The signature at the bottom looked exactly like mine. The same looping R, the same slant, the same pressure on the pen. At the bottom was a notary seal, Kevin Wright, Notary Public, Round Rock, Texas. Date October 12th, 2023. This isn't my signature, I said. David frowned. Mr. Chambers, it's a very good forgery if it is. We've processed dozens of transactions with your signature. This one matches. Yet I stared at the notary seal. I'm going to Round Rock. The address listed on the notary stamp led me to a small office park 20 minutes north of Austin. The office was cramped, cheap furniture, peeling paint, a single desk with a laptop. A young man sat behind the desk, maybe 24 years old, wearing a wrinkled dress shirt. He looked up when I walked in. Can I help you? Are you Kevin Wright? Yeah, who's asking? I set the power of attorney document on his desk. You notarized this last month. He glanced at the paper, then back at me. His face went pale. Oh God, You notarized a forged document, I said. You stamped a fake signature and let my son walk out of here with legal authority over $2.5 million. He paid me $500 cash, Kevin stammered. He said it was a family matter. He said his dad had dementia and needed help managing his finances. He said he just needed the stamp. I didn't think... Did you check his ID? He showed me a driver's license. My driver's license, I said. The one he stole from my wallet 3 months ago. Kevin's hands were shaking. I'm sorry. I didn't know. He seemed legitimate. I turned and walked out without another word. In the parking lot, I called Rachel. Check your trust fund, I said. The one for your daughters. What, why? Just check it. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Rachel's voice was shaking. Dad, it's gone. $200,000, withdrawn 2 days ago. A cashier's check made out to Palace Casino Las Vegas. I closed my eyes. The education fund for my granddaughters. Gone. I sat in my car outside Kevin Wright's office and pulled out a piece of paper. I needed to see the numbers. All of them. $500,000 to the first creditors. Paid in full 3 weeks ago. $1.4 million to Romano. Negotiated down to $900,000 after I agreed to pay in cash within 72 hours. Paid. $780,000 to the fraud victims. Still owed. I'd promised to repay every cent. $2.5 million attempted theft. Blocked by the bank, but legal fees were already piling up. Lawyers, investigators, forensic accountants. $200,000 from my granddaughter's trust fund. Stolen, unrecoverable. I added it up. The actual damage money already paid or stolen was close to $2.4 million. Nearly half of what I'd received from selling my company. And my son was still out there. The phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but I recognized the number, Margaret's sister's house. Hello? I just talked to our daughter, Margaret said. Her voice was tight, controlled. Tell me it's not true. It's true. There was a long silence. What are you going to do? I'm going to find him, I said. And then I'm calling the FBI. He's your son. He's a criminal. Robert, he stole $200,000 from his nieces, I said. He forged my signature. He used my name to defraud 13 people. He's not a son anymore, Margaret. He's a criminal, and I'm not going to protect him. The line went dead. I sat in the parking lot for another minute, staring at the numbers on the piece of paper. $2.4 million. 43 years of work. Gone. I called Rachel. Where would he go? I asked. I don't know, Dad. He's burned every bridge he had. No friends left. No money. No... Think. She was quiet for a moment. Mom's sister lives in San Marcos. Aunt Linda. She has a garage apartment behind her house. He stayed there a few years ago when he was between jobs. Maybe... Give me the address. She hesitated. Dad, what are you going to do? I'm going to talk to him. That's all. I didn't answer. Dad, just give me the address. She did. I drove home and walked into my office. The family photograph was still on my desk, the 4 of us on the back porch 20 years ago. My son was 17 in that picture, smiling, healthy, full of hope. I picked up the photo and stared at it for a long time. Then I set it face down on the desk. I grabbed my keys, walked out to the car, and started the engine. San Marcos was an hour south. I'd be there before dark. My son had stolen from me. He'd stolen from his nieces. He'd stolen from strangers who trusted my name. He'd forged documents, bribed a notary, and tried to funnel $2.5 million into an offshore account. But he was still my son, and I was going to look him in the eye one more time before I turned him in. Quick note, some of what's next is fictionalized for storytelling. It may not be 100% factual. If you've enjoyed this so far, please share and subscribe for more stories like this. If this isn't your thing, feel free to stop here. No hard feelings. But if you're ready for what comes next, let's continue. I found him 3 days later. Rachel had tracked his phone to a motel in San Marcos, 45 minutes south of Austin. A cheap place off E35, the kind with peeling paint and hourly rates. I drove there alone without telling Margaret, without calling the police. I needed to look him in the eye. I needed to hear him explain how he'd stolen my identity, forged my signature, and defrauded 13 people while sleeping under my roof and eating food I'd paid for. The motel clerk barely looked up when I asked for his room number. Room 23, upstairs end of the hall. I climbed the exterior staircase, my heart pounding. The door to room 23 was ajar. I pushed it open. He was sitting on the bed staring at his phone. The room smelled like cigarettes and stale pizza. Empty beer bottles lined the nightstand. He looked up when I walked in. For a moment, neither of us moved. "Hi, Dad," he said quietly. "Pack your things. You're coming home." "I can't." Yes, you can. We're going to figure this out. We're going to call the FBI, hire a lawyer, make restitution. Dad, you don't understand. I can't go home because they'll find me there. Romano's people. They know where you live. They know where Rachel lives. If I go back, they'll come after all of you. So, you're just going to hide in a motel room. Later it's the I'm going to disappear, change my name, go to Mexico, start over. I stared at him. You think you can run from federal wire fraud charges? His face went pale. What? I know about Chambers' medical ventures. I know about the 13 victims, the shell companies, the Cayman Islands account. The FBI is going to be looking for you within a week. You can't run from that. He stood up, his hands shaking. How did you? Rachel tracked everything. Every wire transfer, every forged signature, every lie you told. I've already started repaying the victims. All of them. $780,000. He sank back down onto the bed. Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could win it back. You thought you could steal from people who trusted me and I'd never find out. I thought I could fix it before anyone got hurt. 13 families are hurt. My reputation is destroyed. Your mother won't speak to me because I refuse to keep enabling you, and you're sitting here planning to run to Mexico like a coward. Okay, what else am I supposed to do? Turn myself in. Go to prison for 20 years. Yes. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. You want me to go to prison? I want you to face consequences, for once in your life. Because if you don't, you'll keep running, keep lying, keep destroying everything you touch until there's nothing left. I'm your son. I know, and I'd give anything to save you, but I can't save you from yourself. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out. Rachel, Dad, I just got a fraud alert on my bank account. Someone tried to access Sarah and Emma's college fund, $75,000. The IP address traces to San Marcos. I read the message twice. Then I looked at my son. Did you try to steal from your nieces? His face went white. Did you try to take Sarah and Emma's college money? Dad, I was desperate. I was going to pay it back. I didn't hear the rest. The room spun. My 15-year-old granddaughter, my 13-year-old granddaughter. Their college fund money Rachel had been saving for years. He'd tried to steal from them. Get out, I said quietly. Yes, Dad, get out of this room. Get in your car and drive as far away from my family as you can. Because if you come near my grandchildren, I will call the police myself. Dad, please. The door burst open. 3 men in FBI jackets filled the doorway. Behind them, I saw Rachel standing in the parking lot, her phone pressed to her ear. Ethan Chambers, the lead agent said. FBI, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. They move fast. Handcuffs. Miranda rights. My son's face pale and terrified, looking at me like I could still save him. I didn't move. They let him out, down the stairs, into the back of an unmarked sedan. Rachel walked over to me. I called them, she said. After I saw the alert on the college fund, I couldn't let him do this anymore, Dad. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. You did the right thing. We stood in the parking lot, watching the FBI car drive away. My phone rang. Margaret, I answered. Robert? Her voice was hollow. Rachel called me. She told me about Sarah and Emma, about the college fund. I know. He tried to steal from his own nieces, from our grandchildren. I know. The line went silent for a long moment. I was wrong, Margaret whispered. About all of it. I thought love meant protecting him. I told you that you were being cruel, that you were giving up on him. And while I was telling you that he was trying to steal from our grandchildren, Margaret, don't. I need to say this. I spent 40 years making excuses for him. Every time he lied, every time he stole, every time he promised to change, I believed him. Because I wanted to believe him. Because admitting the truth would mean admitting that I'd failed as a mother. You didn't fail. Yes, I did. I failed him by never letting him face consequences. I failed you by choosing him over our marriage. And I almost failed Sarah and Emma by defending him when he was planning to rob them. Her voice broke. I don't know who he is anymore, Robert, and I don't know who I am for defending him for so long. Come home, I said softly. I can't, not yet. I need time. I need to figure out how to live with what I've done. She hung up. Rachel touched my arm. Dad, are you okay? I looked at her. My daughter. The one who'd stayed strong, stayed clear-headed, stayed on the right side of this nightmare. No, I said, but I will be. We drove back to Austin in silence. Somewhere behind us, in the back of an FBI sedan, my son was beginning the long journey toward whatever came next. And in front of us, the road stretched out uncertain, painful, but finally honest. The FBI wanted me to make the call. Special Agent Caroline Reese sat across from me in a small interrogation room at the Austin field office, a recording device on the table between us. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of calm authority that came from years of dealing with white-collar criminals. "We need a confession on tape," she said. "Your son has agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence, but we need him to detail the crimes on record. Wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, the whole operation." Why me, I asked. "Because he'll talk to you. He won't admit everything to us, but he might admit it to his father, especially if he thinks there's a chance of forgiveness." I stared at the recording device. "And if he does? What happens then? We use it as evidence in his sentencing hearing. His cooperation will help reduce his sentence from 20 years to maybe 2 or 3, but only if he tells the truth, all of it." I picked up the phone they'd given me, a burner pre-programmed with my son's number at the county jail where he was being held pending trial. "What do I say?" Agent Reese slid a piece of paper across the table. "Ask him these questions, let him talk. Don't interrupt. Don't offer forgiveness or promises, just listen." I looked at the list. "How did you create Chambers Medical Ventures? Who did you defraud, and how much did you take from each person? How did you forge my signature? Where did the money go? Did anyone help you?" My hands shook as I dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Dad." "Hi. I didn't think you'd call." "The FBI wants us to talk. They're recording this. Do you understand?" A pause. "Yeah, my lawyer told me. They said you're cooperating, that you're willing to tell them everything." "I am. I'm done lying, Dad. I'm done running. I need you to know I'm sorry for all of it." Agent Reese pointed to the first question on the list. "Tell me how you created Chambers Medical Ventures," I said. He took a deep breath. "I started about 8 months ago. I was in Vegas and I'd lost everything. I owed Romano $300,000 and I had no way to pay. So I thought, if I could just get a little seed money, I could win it back, double it, pay everyone off, and no one would ever know." So you created a fake company?" "Yeah. I bought a domain name, hired someone on Fiverr to build a website. I copied your bio from LinkedIn. I used stock photos. I made it look real. And the investors? I started with people I knew from church. People who knew you, people who trusted the Chambers name. I told them you were launching a new medical equipment company that you were looking for. Early investors that returns would be 15 to 20%. How many people? 13. Who? He listed them. Every name, every amount. Patricia Hernandez, 65,000. Robert Mitchell, 40,000. Susan Wright, 55,000. On and on until all 13 names were spoken aloud into the recording device. "And you forged my signature," I said. "Yeah, on endorsement letters, on the investment prospectuses. I'd been practicing your signature since I was a kid. It wasn't hard. Where did the money go?" "The shell companies first. Henderson Medical Solutions, Blue Bonnet Capital, Partners, Sunrise Ventures. Then I wired it offshore to the Cayman Islands. From there, I moved it to casinos. Vegas, Macau, Atlantic City. I thought if I could just hit one big win, I could pay everyone back and make it disappear. But you didn't win." "No, I lost almost all of it. $980,000 in 4 months." Agent Reese pointed to the last question. "Did anyone help you?" I asked. "No, it was just me. I did it all alone." The line went quiet. "Dad," he said softly. "Are you still there? I'm here. Do you hate me?" I closed my eyes. "No. Do you forgive me?" I thought about Margaret alone at her sister's house, trying to reconcile the son she'd loved with the man who'd tried to steal from his own nieces. I thought about the 13 families whose savings he'd destroyed. I thought about Rachel standing in that parking lot in San Marcos, making the hardest call of her life. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not today." "Okay." His voice was small, childlike. "I understand. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything you haven't told them?" "Kurt ina old imbar. Just thank you for paying back the victims, for not letting them lose everything because of me. I know it doesn't fix what I did, but thank you." I looked at Agent Reese. She nodded and made a cutting motion across her throat. "Enough. That I have to go," I said. "Okay, Dad." "Yeah. I'm sorry. I know I've said it before, but I mean it this time. I'm really, really sorry." "I know." I hung up. Agent Reese stopped the recording. "That was good. Really good. We have everything we need. What happens now?" "We use this in his sentencing hearing. With full restitution and his cooperation, he's looking at 2 years in federal prison, followed by supervised release. He'll have to pay back the $780,000 over time, attend Gamblers Anonymous, submit to regular drug testing. But he won't serve 20 years. You just saved your son's life. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I didn't save him, I just stopped enabling him. Sometimes that's the same thing. I walked out of the FBI building into bright Texas sunshine. Rachel was waiting in the parking lot leaning against her car. "How'd it go?" she asked. "He confessed, everything, on tape." She nodded. "Good." We stood there for a moment, not speaking. "Mom called me this morning," Rachel said. "She's not coming to the sentencing hearing. She said she can't watch them send him to prison. But she also said she can't forgive him for what he tried to do to Sarah and Emma." "What about you? Can you forgive him?" Rachel looked at me. "I don't know. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm just trying to protect my daughters. And that means keeping him away from them until I know he's really changed." "That's fair. Is it, or am I being cruel like Mom said you were? You're being a good mother." She smiled sadly. "I hope so." I thought about Margaret sitting in her sister's house, wrestling with guilt and grief. I thought about my son sitting in a county jail cell waiting to learn his fate. I thought about Sarah and Emma blissfully unaware that their uncle had tried to steal their future. And I thought about the 13 families I'd repaid people who would never fully trust the Chambers name again, no matter how many checks I wrote. "Come on," Rachel said. "Let's go home." We drove back to Austin together, the recording of my son's confession playing on a loop in my mind. 15 minutes. That's how long it took him to confess to ruining a dozen lives. And now that 15-minute recording would determine whether he spent 2 years in prison or 20. Justice, I was learning, was a strange and imperfect thing. "Where is he?" I asked Agent Mitchell. "Laredo border checkpoint," she said. "He was trying to cross into Mexico. He's in federal custody. Is he okay?" "Physically, yes. But Mr. Chambers, you need to prepare yourself. The evidence is substantial. This was a sophisticated fraud operation. How long did it take you to find him?" "Your son is smarter than you think," she said. "He ditched his phone used, only cash stayed off social media. We tracked him through 3 states, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arizona. He was moving toward the border very carefully. No credit cards, no hotel records. It took 19 days to narrow his location through surveillance footage and informants. 2 days later, they interviewed me at the FBI field office in San Antonio. 4 hours of questions. They asked about my business, my finances, my relationship with my son. They asked when I first suspected fraud. They asked if I'd ever given him access to my accounts. Then they interviewed Margaret, then Rachel, then all 13 fraud victims. The investigation took 2 weeks. On the 3rd day, the story leaked. Austin businessman's son arrested in investment fraud scheme. The headline ran in the Austin American-Statesman. By the next morning, it was everywhere. The church called that afternoon. The pastor was polite apologetic. "Robert, the elders have asked that you step down from your deacon duties until this situation is resolved." "I understand," I said. The neighbors stopped waving. A couple I'd known for 15 years crossed the street to avoid talking to me. Former customers sent carefully worded emails, politely distancing themselves from any association with my name. A business partner I'd worked with for a decade called to say, "It's probably best if we terminate our consulting agreement." My name, 43 years of building a reputation for integrity, was now synonymous with fraud. I called my lawyer. Tom Bradford had been my attorney for 20 years. He'd handled the sale of my company, drafted my will, helped me set up the trust funds for my granddaughters. Now he was helping me navigate the legal fallout of my son's crimes. "By paying full restitution immediately, you're limiting your liability," he explained. "The victims would have to prove you were personally negligent, that you knew or should have known what your son was doing. Since you're also a victim and you've helped them recover financially, most judges will dismiss any civil suits. 3 victims are considering suing for emotional damages. But after you've returned their money, the anger tends to fade. People want justice, not revenge." I spent the next 2 weeks repaying every fraud victim. $780,000. Rachel drove me to each house. Some were kind. They thanked me. They said it wasn't my fault. They shook my hand and told me they were sorry my son had put me through this. Others were not. A man in his 60s opened the door, looked at the check I'd brought, and threw it in my face. "You raised him. This is your fault." A woman in her 50s stared at me with cold contempt. "My daughter needed that money for her wedding. You and your son ruined that." One man refused to speak to me at all. He just stood in the doorway staring at me with a hatred so cold it made my chest ache. The widow who'd invested her late husband's life insurance cried when I handed her the check. You didn't have to do this, she said. Yes, I did. A retired doctor refused to accept the money. Donate it to a gambling addiction charity, he said. Maybe something good can come out of this. I donated it in his name. When the last check had been delivered, I sat in the car with Rachel outside the bank. How much is left? I asked. She pulled up the spreadsheet on her phone. You started with $20 million. You paid $500,000 to the first creditors, $900,000 to settle with Romano, $780,000 to the fraud victims. Legal fees are climbing probably another $100,000 before this is over. So, about $17.3 million. I nodded. That's still a fortune. It doesn't feel like one. That night, Agent Mitchell called. I'm calling to give you a heads up before it hits the news, she said. Your son has been formally charged. 13 counts of wire fraud, 6 counts of identity theft, 4 counts of forgery, 1 count of conspiracy to commit grand larceny. The prosecutor is recommending 15 to 20 years. I sat down slowly. 15 to 20 years. Yes. There was a pause. There's one more thing, she said. He's asked to make a phone call. To you. I stared at the wall. My son, who'd forged my signature stolen from his nieces, defrauded 13 people, tried to steal $2.5 million, wanted to talk to me. It'll be recorded. Agent Mitchell continued. Anything he says can be used in court. We'll monitor the call, but if you want to speak to him, I can arrange it. When I asked, tomorrow, 2 o'clock. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. Margaret found me an hour later. She sat down across from me at the kitchen table. Are you going to talk to him? She asked. I don't know. He's still your son. I know. She reached across the table and took my hand. It was the first time she'd touched me in weeks. Whatever you decide, she said quietly, I'll support you. I looked at her. Her face was pale, her eyes red from weeks of crying. But there was something different in her expression now, something I hadn't seen in years. Clarity. Thank you, I said. The next afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in front of me. Agent Mitchell had sent me a number to call. The call would be recorded. The FBI would be listening. I stared at the phone for 5 minutes. Then I picked it up and dialed. The FBI arranged a 15-minute recorded call. I sat in a small office at their field station in San Antonio, the phone pressed against my ear. Agent Mitchell sat across from me, headphones on monitoring every word. The line clicked. He's Dad. His voice was small, broken. I'm here. They said I could get 20 years. You committed crimes worth 20 years. Silence. Then, I know what I did. It's just, I couldn't stop. Every time I told myself it was the last time, but when I saw the cards or the dice, everything else disappeared. The debts, the people I hurt, the consequences, none of it mattered when I was at the table. When die Frieden trust, he paused. I could hear him breathing shaky and uneven. I remember the first time I won $5,000, he said quietly. At a casino in Oklahoma. It felt like I had superpowers, like I could control the world. The next time I lost $10,000 trying to get that feeling back. Then $50,000, then $500,000. I never got it back, but I couldn't stop trying. I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. You stole your niece's education fund, I said finally. I know. You tried to steal $2.5 million from me. I know. You destroyed 13 people's lives. I know. His voice broke. He started crying. I know, Dad. I'm a monster. I'm everything you never wanted me to be. I closed my eyes. I saw the 10-year-old boy with the crayon drawing. Do you remember Father's Day 2001? What? You were 10 years old. You made me a card, construction paper, stick figures holding hands. You wrote that you wanted to be just like me. Dad, I found that card in my glove compartment, I said. I've been carrying it with me for the past few days, reading it, trying to remember when that boy disappeared. He sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you're sorry, but sorry doesn't fix this. What do? I closed my eyes, fought the tears that were threatening to come. You plead guilty. You go to treatment. Real treatment, not the kind where you just sit in a room and say what they want to hear. You serve your sentence. My voice cracked. And you do it alone for a while. You figure out who you are when there's no one there to prop you up anymore. Will you visit me? I thought about Margaret, about Rachel and her daughters, about the 13 people who'd trusted my name and lost everything, about the man I'd tried to raise and the man he'd become. Ask me in a year, I said. My voice was shaking now. A year in prison, a year of treatment, a year without your mother or me or your sister protecting you from the consequences of what you've done. If, after a year, you're still doing the work, really doing it, then I'll come. But if you're just pretending, if you're just saying what you think I want to hear, then no, I'll know the difference." There was a long silence. "I love you," I said. My voice cracked again. "But you need to do this alone. You need to face what you've done. You need to decide who you want to be. If you can do that, really do it, then yes, I'll visit. But you have to prove it first. What if I can't? Then I guess you won't see me." The line went quiet. I could hear him breathing ragged and unsteady. "I understand," he said finally. "Good. Dad, yeah, I love you." I closed my eyes. "I love you too." The call ended. I sat in the office for a long time staring at the wall. Agent Mitchell brought me a cup of coffee. "That was hard," she said quietly. "It was necessary." I drove home. Margaret's car was in the driveway. She'd come back a few days ago to stay. Not because things were fixed between us, but because running hadn't solved anything. We hadn't really talked about what happened. She slept in the guest room. I slept in the bedroom. We coexisted in the same house like two strangers sharing a waiting room at a hospital. I found her in the bedroom folding laundry. "I talked to him," I said. She didn't turn around. "How was he?" "Scared, remorseful. Still doesn't really understand what he's done." "The FBI called me too," she said. "Asked me about some letter you found." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the Father's Day card. The yellowed construction paper was soft, now worn from being folded and unfolded so many times over the past week. I handed it to her. She unfolded it carefully, read it slowly. Tears ran down her face. "He was so sweet," she whispered. "He was. When did we lose him?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe we didn't lose him. Maybe he lost himself." She handed the card back to me. Her hands were shaking. "The arraignment is tomorrow morning," she said. "Downtown Austin. Are you going?" "Yes." "So am I." We drove separately. The federal courthouse was downtown, a tall building with marble floors and tight security. I found a seat near the back. Margaret sat on the opposite side, 3 rows ahead of me. We didn't speak. At 9 o'clock, they brought him in. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. His hair was shorter. His face was pale and drawn. He glanced around the courtroom and saw me. Our eyes met for a moment. Then he looked away. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The prosecutor read the charges. 13 counts of wire fraud, 6 counts of identity theft, 4 counts of forgery, 1 count of conspiracy to commit grand larceny. "How does the defendant plead?" the judge asked. My son's lawyer stood. "Not guilty, Your Honor. Not guilty." Yet I stared at the back of his head. He didn't turn around. The judge set a trial date 6 months away. The prosecutor requested bail be denied, citing flight risk. The judge agreed. My son would stay in federal custody until trial. The marshals let him out. He didn't look back. Margaret stood and walked out of the courtroom without a word. I sat alone in the empty room, staring at the chair where my son had been sitting. 43 years of building a life, a reputation, a family. And it had all come down to this: a courtroom, an orange jumpsuit, and the word guilty hanging in the air, even though he'd said not guilty. I folded the Father's Day card carefully and put it back in my pocket. Then I walked out into the sunlight and drove home alone. The sentencing hearing was held on a cold morning in January 2026. I arrived at the federal courthouse an hour early. Margaret didn't come. She'd made that clear when I called to tell her about the hearing date. "I can't watch them send him to prison," she'd said. "I just can't." Rachel sat beside me in the gallery, her hand resting on my arm. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. At 9 a.m., the bailiff called the courtroom to order. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. She'd presided over the pre-trial hearings and hadn't shown much sympathy for my son. "United States versus Ethan Chambers," the clerk announced. The side door opened and they brought him in. He kept his eyes on the floor as the bailiff led him to the defendant's table. He didn't look at me, didn't look at Rachel, just sat down beside his court-appointed attorney, a young public defender named Marcus Webb, who'd done his best with an unwinnable case. Judge Morrison reviewed the charges. "Mr. Chambers, you have pleaded guilty to 13 counts of wire fraud, 6 counts of identity theft, 4 counts of forgery, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. Do you understand the charges?" "Yes, Your Honor," my son said. His voice was barely audible. "The United States Attorney's Office has recommended a sentence of 15 to 20 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Mr. Webb, does the defense wish to make a statement before sentencing?" Marcus Webb stood. "Your Honor, the defense respectfully requests leniency. Mr. Chambers has a documented gambling addiction. He's cooperated fully with the investigation. He's expressed genuine remorse for his actions, and his father has made full restitution to all 13 victims, totaling $780,000. Judge Morrison glanced at me. Mr. Robert Chambers, you repaid the victims? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. That's admirable, but it doesn't change the fact that your son committed 24 federal crimes over a 6-month period. Sit down. I sat. Judge Morrison turned back to my son. Mr. Chambers, do you wish to address the court? Decision. My son stood slowly. He glanced at his attorney, then at the judge. Finally, he looked at me. I know what I did was wrong, he said. I know I hurt people. I hurt my family. I hurt people who trusted my father's name. His voice cracked. I don't have an excuse. I was desperate, and I made terrible choices. I thought I could fix it. I thought if I just won one more hand, I could pay everyone back and no one would ever know. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, but I couldn't stop. Every time I lost, I borrowed more. Every time I lied, I had to tell another lie to cover it up. And by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. Mr. Chambers' gambling addiction is a serious illness, but it's not a defense for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. You didn't just steal money, you stole your father's reputation. You forged his signature. You destroyed 13 families' savings. Some of those victims are here today. She gestured to the gallery. I turned and saw them faces I recognized. Mrs. Hernandez, the widow who'd lost her husband's life insurance. Thomas Anderson, the retired teacher. Susan Wright Michael's mother. They were all staring at my son with expressions of anger, pain, and betrayal. These people trusted the Chambers name, Judge Morrison said. They trusted your father's reputation, and you exploited that trust for your own gain. That's not addiction, Mr. Chambers. That's calculated fraud. My son sat down, his shoulders shaking. Judge Morrison folded her hands. I've reviewed the pre-sentencing report. I've considered the defendant's cooperation, his lack of prior criminal history, and the full restitution made by his father. I've also considered the severity of the crimes, the number of victims, and the calculated nature of the fraud. She paused. Mr. Ethan Chambers, I hereby sentence you to 24 months in federal prison, followed by 24 months of supervised release. During your supervised release, you will be required to attend Gamblers Anonymous meetings 3 times per week, submit to random drug and alcohol testing, and make monthly restitution payments of $1,000 until the full amount of $780,000 is repaid to your father. Rachel gasped beside me. 2 years, not 15, not 20. 2 years. Additionally, Judge Morrison continued, you are prohibited from entering any casino gambling establishment or online gambling site. You are prohibited from opening any credit accounts without the approval of your probation officer, and you are required to maintain full-time employment throughout your supervised release period. She looked at my son. Mr. Chambers, you were given every advantage in life. You had a father who loved you, who gave you opportunities, who even gave you part of his own body to save your life. And you repaid him by stealing his identity and destroying his reputation. If your father hadn't made restitution, you'd be looking at 20 years. Do you understand that? O gisidziant, expa indigors. Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand how lucky you are? Yes, Your Honor. Then don't waste this chance. Bailiff, remand the defendant to custody. The bailiff stepped forward. My son stood, and for the first time, he looked directly at me. His eyes were red, filled with tears. I'm sorry, Dad, he mouthed. I nodded. I couldn't speak. They let him out through the side door. Outside the courthouse, Rachel hugged me. 2 years, she said. I thought he'd get 10 at least. He got lucky, I said, because I paid. You saved him. No, I saved the victims. He's still going to prison. We walked to the parking lot in silence. The sky was gray, threatening snow. I thought about my son sitting in a cell somewhere, waiting to be transferred to federal prison. I thought about Margaret alone at her sister's house, unable to face what our family had become. And I thought about the 13 victims sitting in that courtroom, watching my son apologize for destroying their lives. Dad, Rachel said, are you okay? I looked at her. No, but I will be. She nodded. I'll come by tonight. We can figure out next steps. Next steps? Visiting schedule, phone calls, how we're going to handle the next 2 years. 2 years. It sounded like a long time, but compared to what it could have been, it was nothing. I drove home alone. The house was empty. Margaret's things were still gone. The kitchen table where I'd written checks to 13 families was covered in dust. I sat down and stared at the wall. My son was going to federal prison. My wife had left me. My reputation was in ruins, but somehow we'd survived. And maybe that was enough. I drove to FCI Bastrop on a Wednesday morning in April, 6 months after the sentencing. The prison was an hour east of Austin, a low-security federal facility surrounded by chain-link fences and razor wire. I'd driven past it 100 times over the years, never imagining I'd one day be visiting my own son inside. The guard at the front desk checked my ID, logged my name, and handed me a visitor's badge. "He's in the visitation room. 30 minutes?" I nodded and followed another guard down a long, fluorescent-lit hallway. The air smelled like disinfectant, and something else, something stale and hopeless. The visitation room was small, with a dozen plastic chairs bolted to the floor, and a vending machine humming in the corner. A few other families sat scattered around the room, speaking in low voices. I took a seat at the far end and waited. 5 minutes later, he walked in. He looked thinner. His hair was cut short military style, and he wore an orange jumpsuit with FCI Bastrop stenciled across the back. His eyes found mine, and for a moment, neither of us moved. Then he sat down across from me. "Hi, Dad," he said. His voice was quiet, almost tentative. I hadn't heard him sound like that since he was a child. Hi, I said. We sat in silence for a long moment. I didn't know where to start. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say, accusations, questions, apologies, but none of them felt right. How are you?" I finally asked. He shrugged. "I'm okay. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. I have a job in the kitchen. I'm going to AA meetings. Well, Gamblers Anonymous. They have meetings twice a week." "Good." Another silence. "Mom didn't come," he said. I nodded. "She's not ready." "Is she ever going to be ready?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. He looked down at his hands, his fingers laced together on the table. "I'm sorry, Dad. I know that doesn't mean anything. I know it doesn't fix what I did, but I'm sorry." I touched the scar below my ribs, a reflex I'd developed over the past 3 years whenever I thought of him. 15 years ago, I'd given him part of my body, convinced that love meant sacrifice. Now, I was learning to give him something harder, the freedom to carry his own consequences. "Then I know you are," I said. "Do you hate me?" The question caught me off guard. "No," I said, "I don't hate you." "Then why didn't you pay when they came to the house, when they threatened you? Why didn't you just pay them and make it stop?" "En Yarand." I leaned back in my chair, studying his face. He looked genuinely confused, as if he couldn't understand why I hadn't bailed him out one more time. "Because paying wouldn't have stopped it," I said. "You would have kept gambling, you would have kept lying, and eventually someone would have gotten hurt. Maybe you, maybe me, maybe someone else. I couldn't let that happen. So you let me go to prison instead. I let you face the consequences of your choices." His jaw tightened. "You gave up on me." "No," I said. "I stopped enabling you. There's a difference." He looked away, his eyes glistening. For a moment I thought he might cry, but he didn't. He just sat there staring at the wall, his hands clenched into fists. "I lost everything," he said quietly. "My job, my friends, my family. Mom won't even talk to me. Rachel won't return my calls. And you," he looked back at me. "You look at me like I'm a stranger." "You are a stranger," I said. "The son I thought I knew wouldn't have stolen from his own family. He wouldn't have forged my name or defrauded 13 people. I don't know who you are anymore." "Then why are you here?" I thought about that for a long time. "Because I'm still your father," I said. "And no matter what you've done, I'm not going to abandon you. But I'm not going to rescue you either. You have to do that yourself." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I don't know if I can. Then you'll stay here for 2 years and you'll figure it out. Or you won't and you'll end up back here someday. But that's your choice, not mine." The guard at the door called out, "5 minutes." My son looked at me, his expression raw and desperate. "What if I can't do it, Dad? What if I screw up again? Then you'll deal with the consequences. Again. And you'll just watch." "No," I said. "I'll be here, but I won't catch you." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. The guard called time, and we both stood. For a moment I thought about reaching out, hugging him, telling him that everything would be okay. But I didn't, because I didn't know if it would be. "Take care of yourself," I said. "You too, Dad." I walked out of the visitation room, past the other families, past the guards, and out into the parking lot. The sun was bright, almost blinding after the dim fluorescent lights inside. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the prison, thinking about the boy I'd raised and the man he'd become. Then I drove home. That night, I sat on the back porch, a glass of whiskey in my hand, watching the sun set over the hills. Margaret hadn't called. Rachel had sent a text asking how the visit went, but I hadn't replied yet. The house was quiet, empty. I thought about my son sitting in his cell, wondering if I hated him. I thought about the 13 victims slowly rebuilding their savings. I thought about the $20 million I'd worked 40 years to earn, now reduced to $17.6 million after repaying the debts. And I thought about the scar below my ribs, the one I'd carried for 15 years, the one that used to remind me of sacrifice. Now it reminded me of something else, that love doesn't mean fixing someone. It means standing beside them while they learn to fix themselves. I finished my whiskey, set the glass down, and went inside. Somewhere in a prison an hour away, my son was learning the same lesson. I just hoped it wasn't too late. I woke before dawn on the 23rd of November, 2025. The kitchen was dark. I made coffee and sat at the same table where I'd spent 3 years, staring at a family photo that felt like an artifact from another life. Margaret had come home in May. We'd been rebuilding slowly, therapy twice a week, learning to talk again. Some nights we slept in the same bed. Other nights, she took the guest room. I didn't ask why. At 10 o'clock, I drove to FCI Bastrop. The parking lot was nearly empty. Inside the release office, a corrections officer handed me a clipboard. 20 minutes later, the door opened and my son walked out. He was 34 now. His hair had gone silver gray at the temples. Lines framed his eyes. He carried a cardboard box that held everything he owned, 3 books, a folder of certificates, a laminated card I'd given him 2 years earlier. He saw me and stopped. Then he saw his mother standing behind me, and his face crumpled. Margaret stepped forward first. She pulled him into her arms, and he buried his face in her shoulder. I waited. When she let go, he turned to me. I held out my hand. He looked at it then, at me, and shook his head. Dad, he said, I don't deserve a handshake. I pulled him into a hug. He smelled like industrial soap and old cotton. I felt his shoulders shake. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for being here. We drove back in silence. Margaret sat in the back seat with him. I watched them in the rearview mirror. She held his hand the entire way. Rachel had insisted he stay in the guest cottage behind the main house. She'd said it plainly, I won't let my children sleep under the same roof as him. Not yet. I'd expected anger. Instead, I saw something harder, caution. I walked Ethan through the cottage, bedroom, bathroom, small kitchenette with a microwave and a 2-burner stove. He set the box on the bed and looked around. It's perfect, he said. That night, the 4 of us sat down to dinner. Margaret had made pot roast. Rachel arrived alone. Michael had taken the girls to a movie. We passed plates in silence. The conversation was careful weather Austin traffic, a new grocery store on South Congress. No one mentioned prison. No one mentioned the trial. After 20 minutes, Rachel excused herself. Margaret cleared the table. Ethan and I sat across from each other. I have conditions, I said. He nodded. I know. I pulled out a printed sheet from his probation officer. Weekly check-ins, mandatory gamblers, anonymous meetings 3 times a week, random drug testing. He couldn't leave Texas without written permission. He couldn't enter a casino, a racetrack, or any establishment with slot machines. He had to maintain full-time employment and make monthly restitution payments. Any violation meant 2 years back in federal prison. I'll follow everyone, he said. 3 months passed. Ethan found work at Austin Medical Supply Company, an entry-level warehouse job paying $12 an hour. The owner was a friend who owed me a favor. In January, Ethan moved into a small apartment in South Austin. On the 15th of each month, he mailed his first restitution check, $1,000. 13 years of payments remained. He attended GA meetings, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights. By February, he was mentoring 2 younger men. On Sundays, he came to the house for dinner. Margaret cooked. Rachel came twice. The girls didn't. In March, Rachel called me. I'm bringing them next Sunday, she said. 1 hour, supervised. That Sunday, Sarah and Emma sat on the couch while Ethan read to them from a picture book he had bought at a thrift store. They didn't smile. They didn't speak. When the hour ended, Rachel stood and they followed her to the door. As she left, Rachel turned to me. This isn't for him, she said. It's for them. Thanksgiving arrived. Rachel's family came at 2 o'clock. Sarah was 15 now, Emma 13. They were shy, at first standing in the doorway with their coats still on. Then Emma saw the pumpkin pie on the counter and asked if she could have a piece. Margaret laughed and said, after dinner. Ethan helped me in the kitchen. I carved the turkey while he stirred the gravy. Margaret set the table. Rachel watched from the doorway, arms crossed, but she didn't leave. We sat down at 4 o'clock. Michael said, grace. We passed dishes. Conversation was cautious, but real school soccer practice a new dog Rachel's family had adopted. Sarah asked Ethan what prison was like. The table went silent. "I lived him," he said, "and lonely." She nodded and didn't ask anything else. After dinner, Ethan stood. He pulled the laminated card from his wallet and set it on the table. "I've carried this for 2 years," he said. His voice shook. "Dad gave it to me the first time he visited. It's from a letter I wrote when I was 10 years old. I said I wanted to be honest. I wanted to help people." He paused. "I failed at that for 30 years. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small frame. Inside was a new drawing stick figures, holding hands the same crayon style from 2 decades earlier. Beneath it was a note in his handwriting. "Dad, I'm not the man you hoped I'd be, but I'm trying to become the man the boy wanted to be. 34 years old, 936 days sober." Margaret covered her mouth. Rachel looked away, but I saw her wipe her eyes. I took the frame. "Thank you," I said. After everyone left, Margaret and I sat on the back porch. The November air was cool. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Do you think he'll make it?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. "I don't know," I said finally, "but I believe in the man he's becoming." She reached over and took my hand. It was the first time in 3 years. "I'm 71 years old. I have less money than I did 5 years ago. My reputation is being rebuilt one conversation at a time. My marriage nearly ended. My son has 13 years of restitution payments ahead of him. He could relapse tomorrow. Some nights Margaret still sleeps in the guest room. Rachel won't let the girls stay overnight. But when I look at the family photo on the mantle, older now scarred, still together, I don't see certainty. I see hope. And every morning I choose hope again. If you're reading this, learn from my mistakes. Don't be like me. I spent 43 years building a reputation, a fortune, a family, only to watch my son destroy it in 4 months. This family betrayal wasn't just about money. It was about trust, shattered love, weaponized, and a father who believed unconditional support meant protecting his child from every consequence. I was wrong. Here's what I learned from this family story. Enabling isn't love. When I paid his first gambling debt, I didn't save him. I taught him I would always catch him. When I gave him a kidney, I thought I was giving him a second chance at life. Instead, he saw it as proof I'd never let him fall. Every rescue became another brick in the wall between the man he was and the man he could have been. The hardest lesson, family betrayal cuts deepest, because it comes from those we die to protect. My son stole $2. 4 million defrauded 13 people, forged my name, and nearly destroyed my marriage. Yet on that porch holding Margaret's hand after 3 years of silence, I realized something: God doesn't call us to fix our children. He calls us to love them. And sometimes love means stepping back and letting them face the consequences of their choices. This family story isn't over. My son has 13 years of restitution ahead. Relapse is possible. Forgiveness is slow. But hope isn't the same as certainty, it's a daily decision. So here's my advice: set boundaries early. Don't confuse mercy with enabling. Teach your children that actions have consequences. And when they fall, because they will, don't catch them. Stand ready to help them stand again. Because real love isn't saving someone from pain. It's walking beside them through it. Thank you for walking with me to the end of this journey. I'd love to hear your perspective. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you do if you found yourself in Robert's impossible situation? Torn between protecting your child and letting justice take its course, your voice matters here. If this family story resonated with you, consider subscribing so you won't miss future narratives that explore the complex terrain of family betrayal, redemption, and second chances. A quick note: while inspired by real-world patterns of addiction, fraud, and familial conflict, certain elements have been dramatized for storytelling purposes. If this content doesn't align with your preferences, feel free to explore other videos that might suit you better. I appreciate you stopping by either way.